I challenged myself repeatedly, actually since childhood. Most of the time, that challenge felt like trying to achieve something new, to address a deep seated fear of mine. I cherish my freedom, and the pattern has always felt like I needed to achieve something to get free, which implied that I felt like I was in prison. Can you identify with that? Now, I've noticed how my inner life was filled with this chaos, and it ruled much of my behavior and my focus. And I suppose that I had some fears that were triggered or was causing me to respond from that chaos that I felt inside. And let me tell you, that chaos that I felt inside threw some very interesting circumstances at me, threw some very interesting people into my life. Interesting circumstances, interesting people, fascinating. You know, it's not mine to do over again, but I don't know that I'd want it any other way. Of course, I survived and have, after many years, gotten clear. So in that context, it now seems like a blessing to me, and I'm hoping that I can follow through with some of the wishes of my father to share freely and openly the things that I have on my heart and share those with others for my benefit and for the benefit of others. But along with that inner chaos, there was a lot of confusion, hope, misunderstandings. And let me tell you, it takes time and patience and a lot of reflection to review what's happening in your life and to understand. This phenomenon in my life brought me in front of a lot of rich and powerful people, highly talented and also some very influential people. I studied them closely and I learned to do a lot of this as a child. When I was growing up, I'd been doing it unconsciously ever since, much of my own life. You know, into this deep inner exploration that I've conducted on myself, and until most recently, you know, this was all happening without a lot of great awareness on my part. So in this video, I wanted to share 3 things that I've learned about limiting yourself from the hundreds of character studies that I've done. So I felt confined and limited by life. I felt judged. And as if I had to suffer. I felt confined and limited by life. I felt judged and as if I had to suffer or sacrifice something or abandon some dear part of myself to get by in life at an early age. I never wanted to be told what to do or controlled, and I resented authority. So I studied authority figures initially. Then as I got good at it, I studied other exceptional characters, and those with talents and those who were achieving things in life, like, heroes that people made out, whether they were sports heroes or political figures or people of celebrity and fame. And then finally, I studied more common characters who I just found interesting. And I even found families interesting. And so I studied their histories, and I looked deep into the patterns that I could see between people in the families to try to understand what was driving the common outcomes that I saw in their lives, for better or for worse. And I was blessed without having a lot of judgment in my life about people being good or bad, and so a lot of people were very accepting and interested in having me around, and they invited me in, and I felt like I had empathy with them, and so there was some give and take. Hopefully there was an even trade between what I was observing and learning from these other people and the care and concern that I was taking in my role in their lives. So, but most of these studies were driven to understand them. And typically there was something that they said at some point that just didn't quite fit with how they said it. Let me repeat that. Something literally that they said, or some viewpoint that they were operating from, didn't vibe or didn't coincide with the way that they said it, or in the circumstance. Something was out of alignment that I would notice, and that would intrigue me, and it would cause me to look a little bit deeper and try to get to know them a little bit better. And so I learned, early on, was ways to uncover, something that was troubling someone often, and maybe troubling them, in their relationships or in their work or the craft that they were putting their focus on, or maybe it was troubling their soul. So I was also noting their strengths and their weak spots. And usually whenever I obtained, answers to some of those questions that I had and those insights, I would have this knowledge and insights into these people. And in every case except one, they would push me away. And, it might happen, soon, or it might take a little bit of time for circumstances to unfold. But at some point, it got a little too close for comfort, so to speak. And, I realized that they just couldn't bear what I understood about their condition, about their progress in life, maybe what I understood about what they really wanted or needed, and whether or not they were actually aligned with pursuing that in their life, and how much support they might have or might not have around them toward that end. So, I understand that people could feel compromised and seen in a way that they'd not been seen before, as I was learning about myself and about life and about them, through this process. And, I usually just had to accept the fact that they pushed me away in one way or another. And looking back, my own innocent spirit met the hillbillies of the Ozarks when I was growing up. that's where I really learned to watch people and try to get insights as to what was working in the different games that I saw people playing. Because it was so easy in the Ozarks to see people in the city that I grew up in was rather sophisticated. They had universities and churches, and then the countryside, was full of more like people. I think they saw themselves as people from the mountains that were, more simple and unsophisticated. And there was this huge contrast. So with those contrasts, I had a chance to see into the games that were being played in each different community or different circumstances. And I'm sharing that not to try to dwell on what I did, but I'm sharing that because I think it is those contrasts that we can note that will give you the tools and insights to be able to separate and have a greater understanding of people and circumstances and of your inner life, but more importantly, the games that are being played in the world that must be played. I mean, there's no way that we cannot resort to some system for survival. And there's always a set of patterns that satisfy some of our needs for survival and are involve relationships with other people and money and the resources that we need to get by. So, but looking back, at how I started in the Ozarks and growing up, there were some pretty scary people around. And if you've ever seen the movie Deliverance, there were some hillbillies in that were very primal. And that primal nature is something that is inherent in every game that you may encounter. In any circumstance with any human being, you're going to see some primal needs and some primal traits surface, and that can be very scary. And for me as a youngster, when I saw those, that was had a really strong impact on me. And it created a lot of chaos in me. And putting order to that chaos has been a long time coming. So actually it's taken decades to get beneath the underlying theme of my feelings and the motives behind my explorations. The experiments that I've conducted in my life, consciously and unconsciously, the dark alleys that I've walked down because of my curiosity and my interest and focus to see what would really happen and what it would really feel like if this, and this were so, or if this was really true, or in some cases questioning if God was on my side and if I could survive this situation or not. So I was always curious about those underlying feelings and themes and the motives that I had in my life. So these experiments and my research into other people, into topics, they ended up spanning all cultures and all over the world. And I feel very fortunate to have had a chance to experience firsthand so much variety in my life. So after making a name for myself in energy, in the oil business in particular, and as an engineer, I learned how to pick winners. I was good at engineering, and I was also pretty good with people. And I got into positions where I was valuing, big investments, and I was not only just valuing them, I would also opine as to whether or not they were possible or not. And I started two companies, and I co-founded a financial services firm. So that attracted a lot more people to me. And interestingly, I found myself trying to be a nice guy from time to time, even though I was dealing with some inner rage and confusion. And so not long ago, a young man approached me to mentor him, and he was starting a renewable energy company. And from the beginning, I knew that there was something about him that struck me as kind of like an idiot. And but there was also another really smart side of him, and he'd gotten a patent on an untested machine, which is kind of unique that someone would patent something that had never been proven to work in the first place. But he was a bit of a salesman and a bit of a con man. So this was a pretty interesting circumstance after I'd, dealt with so many, you know, um, more proven things. But I was also interested in renewable energy, which his widget or his invention was in that sector. So I was curious about exploring how investment worked in renewables, and I was kind of interested to see what I could do with this circumstance that had popped up in front of me. So I got a bad feeling up front that he was going to try to scam investors with this, and I found a flaw in the engineering of the widget that was the core of his renewable energy proposal, and I was curious if anyone else would notice it. So I helped him, and I mentored him, and I got to chance to know him and really study, who he was, his family, and even others that he wanted to bring into this company that he wanted to start. That was all built around a bunch of assumptions that were made around this widget working. And I introduced him to a lot of people, and he ended up, getting quite a ways forward. I even had a chance to test it at a major university in the United States to see if it would work or not. And they, like me, really pointed out the engineering flaws that he had missed in his design phase. But that's not the point of this. I think I did it partially also to be a kind of a father figure or a mentor to this young man. And I didn't feel like it was something that was, he didn't ask me to come in and tell him if it would work or not. He asked me to be his mentor. And to me, that meant, holding his hand through the relationships and through the ups and downs of taking an invention potentially to market and in front of investors and being there for him. So, as he progressed, quite far, I stumbled into a situation where I discovered that he had some alcoholic problems. His alcoholism surfaced, and I confronted him about that alcoholism. And as the relationship really got near its end, I also confronted him about some of the flaws in the engineering that would really condemn this company that he was wanting to start. And sadly, there was a huge wound left in this young man because his mother had been an alcoholic and been very neglectful and abusive to he and his siblings in his early childhood. And so he had some abandonment wounds and some family issues that he was really, really struggling to overcome at this time. So I think I want to also talk about him, about the false engineering assumptions in his models and projections, but I do hope to have had an influence on him because I saw a young kid with aspirations, but basically with a huge wound left by the abandonment of his own alcoholic mother on his family when he and his siblings were all very young. Let me tell you another story real quick before I finally get to the three things the lessons that I learned from these. But I also studied an old guru who he had stuck like thousands of needles and injected many narcotics into his body with the intention of escaping and seeing something exceptional. To return eventually at some point in his life, you could easily and clearly see that he was returning to being this little entitled rich kid who was trying to get his dad's respect and his mother's love and attention. And if you go back and you look at many gurus who are pursuing power and influence over others and are telling them the rules and how to be and how not to be, you may get some of your own insights into how what's working with them and the void that they're filling for these followers that they've gotten into their lifestyle. But I found that is a common pattern. But there was one particular guru I studied where it was so clear that he was suffering so much, even with all of his insight and knowledge, he was not finding any peace or relief from that childhood, that deep core wound, that prison that he had been in. And then there was another CEO that I studied. It was a very, very close father figure to me. And I saw him take advantage of his underlings, and I saw him being a bully, over and over again, just to turn and say that no matter what he achieves, he feels no satisfaction from his family. And he once told me, they'll eat my beans, but they won't sit at my table. I also was friends and knew a exceptionally gifted, really nice person who was the adopted son of a billionaire. And he'd started several nonprofits and been involved in ministries and was trying to help people with a vigor. And when I finally caught up with him after not seeing him for a couple of years, he told me how empty he felt and how disconnected he felt from all these other people that he had given things to, like to help start these nonprofits and really given a lot of opportunities and for other people in their lives to improve their lives and to achieve some affluence themselves and some independence and satisfaction, from doing the social work that they wanted to do. But he was disconnected from that. And I couldn't help but see the pattern of him being torn away from his own mother and put into an adopted family and being disconnected from what he really was searching for and what he really needed. So one of the first principles that I wanted to share was that your imprisonment that you may be feeling, or that conditioning is at your core, that's set in the first 6 years of your life. And you may even feel influences from your mother who was carrying you before you were born. And they say that you can take a person out of the trailer park, but you can't take the trailer park out of the person. And I don't mean that offensively, but I mean that as what I've witnessed over and over again is that you cannot escape dealing with that. So the second point I wanted to share with you was that it's so important to understand, and even more important to accept where you came from, to get clear about the messages and the motivations that are driving your focus and behavior in your life. Acceptance must be achieved to avoid the pitfalls of unconscious and reckless pursuits. And you may have to reconcile a lot of missteps along the way to get clear. That's been my experience. I think a lot of that has to do with how early you are able in your life to accept and understand your conditioning and not repeat those patterns over and over again, because the more times you repeat is to get clear. And finally, number 3, when you do get clear, be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. If you try to escape the conditioning rather than deal with it, you may be in for some big surprises. And there's a good chance that you may already have what you want. And it may feel so different from what you had imagined or held in some fantasy that it would be like, that it's very difficult to accept. So I hope that you do find some clarity in considering these 3 points in your life. It'll take some work. Wishing you all the best.